Hello and welcome to the TestRail 7.0 What's New webinar. So this webinar will cover what is new in our latest release of TestRail, which came out this week. So my name is John Reynolds, and I will be your presenter for this webinar. With us, we also have Jacob Scott and Shanu Mondot, who will be answering some questions in the chat console as we go through the webinar. So let's get going here. So during the webinar, we're going to cover the changes that are available in TestRail 7.0. So these changes cover the separated steps field, along with the shared test steps. So shared test steps are a long requested feature by customers, which allow sharing of test steps between test cases. Also, test case restore, so deleted test cases can be restored within your projects. We have some API changes to support all of these features, and then a couple of other minor changes, including PHP 7.4 support and a change to the layout of the customizations area. So for the changes to the separated steps field, we've made a couple of enhancements to allow customers to use more information inside the separated steps. We've added an additional information field along with a references field. The reference field will utilize the reference integration for your project or instance. Both of these fields are optional, but you can enable them on a per project basis as needed. We've made some tweaks to the UI for the separated steps field to change the layout a bit and move some buttons around, which we'll get into in just a moment. We've improved the export for your test cases to allow the separation of these steps onto separated lines, which makes for easier importing of these test cases into other projects. We've made some API changes, as mentioned a moment ago, and predictive text. We've added some predictive text for shared steps. Some of the API items and predictive text we will get into when we cover shared steps and the API. So first, for the separated steps field, by default, these additional fields are not enabled. So a TestRail administrator would need to go in and enable these fields for the projects in which you want to use them. But we've just added these under the configuration options for the separated steps field, where you can add the additional information field and the references field if you want. These do not affect test results. So when entering test results for your tests, there will still be a single result field if you have it configured. So moving on, in the UI, we've changed how the edit screen works for separated steps. So you now have the option to use the new fields. We've made some changes to the buttons and added a button for references. So the add button for references will utilize the reference add URL for your integration. So as long as that is configured, then the add button will appear, which I'll show a couple of examples here. So here we have highlighted the first redlined area on the left is the add new button. So when you click inside the reference field, the add new button will appear so that we don't have an extra button overlaying other areas. We've also moved the image and table icons for Markdown inside of each field to make them easier to identify which button would add your images or tables where. We've also redesigned the reorganization buttons, add and delete steps. You can also see the share and import buttons here as well. The share import buttons will be for the shared test steps. So when viewing your test cases, a saved test case, the text boxes for these steps are laid out pretty similarly to the way they are already. However, if you have 4 fields enabled, you will have the 3 larger text boxes than the smaller reference field here. And I've also shown an example of the link hovering, which would still work for the references entered inside the reference field. So you can still look up your linked requirements, user stories, or anything else you have using an integration. So the reference field will still function in the same way. So this allows you to place a reference on each test step as needed for a little greater traceability inside your test cases. So, as mentioned, you can also now include the separated steps on separate rows of your test case exports. So when exporting a test suite, you can just check the box to include separate steps on new rows, and also ensure that you do check the box to include those columns, and your test steps will be separated out individually so you can edit these as needed, import them into other projects, and also just view the test cases a little easier in your export Excel file or whatever spreadsheet tool you use. So the next main change for TestRail 7.0 is shared test steps. So this feature will allow users to create a set of steps and reuse these in test cases throughout a project. So these cases are reusable within the same project, including multi-suite and baseline projects. So you can have one set of shared steps and use them in the same across multiple test cases in different suites within the same project. It's important to note that these steps are not shared between projects, but are shared only within their respective projects. These steps are based on the separated steps field. So if you use a single text box for your steps, the shared steps would not apply here. You should use the separated steps field if you would like to utilize shared test steps. When viewing your list of test cases, you can click on the Shared Test Steps button to access your list of existing shared steps. You can import existing sets of shared steps into your test cases. You can also define new sets of shared steps while viewing your existing test cases. So if you are just getting started with 7.0, you have some test cases where you want to take some of those steps and turn them into shared steps. You can do that from within your existing test case, which I will cover in just a moment. And that will just create a set of shared steps for you to then import into other test cases, so you don't need to rewrite everything. So existing steps or sequences of steps can be exported to be shared. With these shared steps, any edits to these sets will update any test cases that use the steps. So this is the main feature of this is allowing you to simply edit a single set of steps and have it update, say, 10, 20, 50, or 100 test cases that would use those common steps. We also have some predictive text implemented. So when writing your test cases, if you start typing something that matches a title of one of your shared test steps, you can quickly import them if that is what you wish to do. So you do not need to browse the repository. You can just simply start typing in a title and then import them very quickly into your test case. We've also updated various API endpoints and created new API endpoints to support the shared test steps. So here we're showing just the shared step repository. So had I clicked on the shared test steps button in the previous screen, you will see that you have a list of shared test steps. So each test step has a title and also a list of test cases in which these steps are used. So you can easily identify and find out which test cases are using your steps for easier navigation, and also understanding what edits you make, what test cases will be affected by any edits you do make. So to create a shared test step, you can do it from within the repository, which I just shown. You just simply add a title and you add as many steps as you need here. The fields that display here will be based on the project configuration that you have. So if you only have the step description field enabled, then the additional step expected result and reference field will not appear. But the fields which do appear will just match your project configuration. So when editing shared steps, you can see which test cases that use this set of steps. So once again, you can easily see which cases will be affected by your changes. but the edit here is going to be very similar to the edit within a test case. The only difference is you don't have the share and import buttons when editing just a set of shared steps by itself. When inside a test case, if you have existing steps that you do want to share, just press the share button and you can define a new set of shared steps from your test case. So once again, you can only select a sequence of steps. So in this screenshot here, I would not be able to select both steps 1 and 4. I would have to select steps that are in sequence. If there are already shared steps, you cannot then reshare them again as part of other shared steps. So each set of steps is a unique set. And once you do decide to share from within a test case and save the changes, those steps will automatically be defined as shared within that test case and then usable in any other test case that you do have. If you want to import or insert existing shared steps into your test cases, just press the Import Steps button or the Import button, and you can browse your existing set of shared steps and insert those into your test case before or after the step from where you press the Import button. And then when editing your test cases, as I mentioned, if you start typing in something that matches the title of an existing set of shared steps, you will see a prompt as shown here, allowing you to quickly import that set of shared steps, and they will automatically just be inserted into your test case. And here is just a display of a couple of steps which are marked as shared. So they have a slightly different colored background. And in the bottom left corner, you can see that the shared icon with the title of that set of shared steps. So these are treated as a group. So if you want to move them up and down or change the order within a test case, the entire set of steps will move together. So that more or less covers it for shared test steps. So let's move on to the next major feature in this release, which is test case restore. So previously, if you deleted a test case in TestRail, it was permanent, immediate, and not reversible without a restore of your TestRail database. So now we've added a permission layer to allow the permanent deletion of test cases. So users without permission to permanently delete test cases, they will be able to mark test cases as deleted, making them restorable. Users with permanent deletion permission will be able to either permanently and immediately delete those test cases or be prompted to mark them as deleted. We would recommend marking them as deleted. After a configured retention policy, these test cases will be deleted. You can configure the retention policy under the site settings area. So a TestRail administrator can set a retention policy of 7 days, 14 days, or 30 days. So after that, the retention policy has passed, any test cases which are marked as deleted will be purged from your instance and database, but you can still undo mistakes that you make up to that retention policy. When viewing your test cases inside your suite or test case repository, you can show or hide these deleted test cases. So you can quickly restore them and undo that deletion. This will allow you to see the impacts of deleting test cases without taking the full risk of permanently deleting test cases. So any test cases which are marked as deleted will have their respective tests hidden from test runs. This would apply to open test runs and plans. So if you delete a test case from the UI, even marking it as deleted, it will have the same visual effects throughout TestRail. So it will be hidden from test runs. It will not be returned in API responses for test runs, etc. So we've updated a few API endpoints to support these test cases marked as deleted, and the same permissions will apply to these endpoints. So in the TestRail UI, I've highlighted the display for deleted test cases, so you can just quickly press this toggle to show and hide the test cases which are deleted. If you select a test case and wish to delete it, if you do not have permanent delete permission, the test case will be marked as deleted and hidden from the UI. It will be immediately moved to this deleted state, but will be restorable immediately as well. If you have permanent delete permission, you will be prompted as to which step you would like to take here. So do you want to mark the test case as deleted or delete it permanently? And if you choose to delete permanently, you will be prompted a second time to confirm. Because once again, deleting a test case permanently is immediate and cannot be undone without some sort of data restore, which could contribute to other data loss, such as test results. So the permission settings in the TestRail UI, you now have the permanently delete option added to cases and sections. So this permanent delete permission really applies to test cases. And then the delete permission allows users to mark them as deleted. So if you do not have delete permission, you will not be able to do any form of delete action on a test case. So permanently delete permission is required to delete cases, or is required to delete all of the following items. So if you want to delete a test case section which contains test cases, since deleting the section is a permanent action, you will be required to have the permanent delete permission. The same thing applies to test suites using delete API endpoints and moving test cases between projects or suites. When moving a test case between a project or suite, this actually deletes the original test case and recreates it in the new suite. So that is the reason it requires permanent delete permissions. A simple workaround to that is just using the copy between projects or suites and then deleting in the original project if you really need to. The permission is not required for deleting empty test case sections or suites. So if a section or suite doesn't have any test cases in it, all you need is the standard delete permissions for cases and sections to be able to delete those items, because there are no test cases to delete. So to support all of the changes that I've discussed so far, we've made some API updates, just a few here. So we have new API endpoints for shared steps. We've also updated existing endpoints to support the new steps fields, shared test steps, restorable test cases, and also permissions to permanently delete test cases. Good thing is none of these changes should break existing API scripts. Any users who already have delete permissions at present will have permanently delete permissions after the update, which I'll get into a little bit more of suggested changes in a minute. But none of these API changes should break existing API scripts. There are just some additional fields added to various endpoints and then new endpoints created, as I mentioned. So the new API endpoints are get shared step and then get shared steps in bulk. So you can get those individual shared steps or all shared steps for your projects. Add shared step, update shared step, and delete shared step. So with the get shared steps endpoint, we currently have the beta period for some API bulk endpoints. We currently have the old API structure for bulk endpoints available using the standard headers. We do recommend using the beta header to utilize the new pagination structure because with TestRail 7.1, we will be ending that beta period. So I'll get more into that in just a minute. We've also updated all of the following API endpoints. Most of these endpoints are simply additional fields. The highlighted endpoints do require now permanent delete permissions, as I mentioned a moment ago. But looking here, we've added or updated quite a few API endpoints to support some things. So for example, with the separated steps field, where it would previously just show the content and expected fields, you can now see content, expected, additional information, and references fields. If you utilize shared test steps, The content will be very similar, except it will also include the shared step ID within the response. So on a GET request, you'll see the shared step ID plus the actual information from the shared step. When submitting an API request to, say, create a test case using shared steps, all you need to do is pass in the ID of the shared step for where you want that set of steps to appear. And then you can add other test case information as needed. So with test cases, a test case property is now added to reflect whether or not a test case is marked as deleted, and that is identified as the is deleted state. So if is deleted is 0, it means the test case is active. If is deleted is 1, then the test case is marked as deleted. You can also update that status. So if a test case is marked as is deleted, you can update that using the update case endpoint to restore that test case using the API. If you would like to mark a test case as is deleted using the API, you must have delete permissions to do so. And once again, the delete case endpoints will permanently delete test cases. So the is deleted status is used just to mark a test case as is in the deleted state. So we do have a couple of other final changes to mention for TestRail 7.0. We have added PHP 7.4 support, and that means we've also dropped support for PHP 7.2, which has reached its end of life. So when using TestRail Server, TestRail Server now supports PHP 7.3 and 7.4 for TestRail 7.0. So if you are upgrading to 7.0 and your server runs PHP 7.2, you will also need to update your PHP version as well. And finally, under the administrations area, we have changed the layout to a tab view. So no longer are all of these items stored in a single list. You can now navigate between case fields, result fields, templates, and other items in a tabbed area. So this would be for a TestRail administrator, just to make navigation a little easier. And a final announcement I alluded to a few moments ago. With TestRail 6.7, we announced changes to the structure of the bulk GET API endpoints, such as GET cases. These changes are currently in beta, accessible using the XAPI ident beta header and value in API requests. The beta period for these changes will end when we release TestRail 7.1, which is tentatively scheduled this month. So we initially had the cutoff date of February 26th. We have decided just to extend that until the release of TestRail 7.1, but we do recommend updating your API scripts to handle these bulk API endpoints if you have not done so already. Once 7.1 is released, that cutoff will be permanent, so you should be using those updated bulk API structures, which is documented on our forums and in our API documentation. So we do have a few minutes left to spare here, so we'll go through some questions and answers. And I do have just a couple of common questions listed here. So can I share test steps between projects? The answer is no. Shared test steps are contained within their respective projects. Are there additional fields for separated step results? No, separated step results will continue to have a single result field. Do TestRail reports cover the reference IDs of separated or shared steps? At the moment, reports are not updated to provide coverage for separated steps. If you do want coverage reports, then you may need to also include those references on the cases reference field as well. And do I need to make any changes to my team's permissions? Currently, if you had the delete permission prior to the upgrade, you will be granted permission to permanently delete test cases. If you are a TestRail administrator, we strongly recommend reviewing these permissions and updating them accordingly, potentially revoking the permanent delete permission from any roles where needed, and then allowing the automatic purge to handle deletion of test cases. This will provide you with a window to undo test case deletion and prevent user errors and data restores down the road. So do we have any questions, Jacob and Shanu, that we'd like to cover in these last few minutes here?
Sure. All right, so will editing a shared step in a test case edit the value in other test cases where the shared step is used?
To edit a shared test step, you would need to edit it within the shared step repository. So the edit function is not available within the test case itself. This allows you to view which test cases will actually be affected by your edits. So you need to open that set inside the shared repository to make those changes.
Yeah, that's kind of the main reason for this change. A lot of people, with tests with steps in common between multiple test cases, wanted to be able to make one change and have it propagate to all of the test cases rather than having to go through each different test case individually and manage those edits separately. Right. One person is commenting on the like the hashtag or pound sign or number sign is the function is changing. I'm not aware of that. Someone is saying it used to bold lines and now it hides lines. I don't know if that's intentional or not. We may need...
There is a minor bug that was reported today. The pound sign is used to create a header line for Markdown formatting. If you use a single pound sign, it will add multiple blank lines when viewing the test case. The data is still there, it's just pushed down further inside the step. A workaround to that right now is just to use I believe it's 2 hyphens instead. There are multiple ways to add a header row through a pound, equal sign, or a hyphen. So if you change which character you use, it should resolve that issue, but the text is still there. It's just pushed down in the UI a little bit. You may have to scroll to see it.
Okay, so thanks for that question, Richard. We are aware of that and we'll be reverting that to go back to the function you're familiar with. I know one person was asking about searching. When you are, if you're like editing a test case and you want to import your test steps, and you're going through the import option to bring in test steps, you will have an option to search. There's an inline search for the step header or the step, like the title of the steps that you're wanting to add in. I don't believe the shared steps will show up in the more traditional project-wide search results. Is that correct, John?
Correct. At present, they do not. The search functionality, the global search functionality for TestRail does not support the steps field at the moment.
Okay. And if you, what would happen if you tried to delete shared steps? Would it notify you that there are test cases using those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I apologize, I didn't cover this. So when you go to delete a shared test step, you will be given the option to delete those steps from all test cases to which they apply, or you can just make them no longer shared and retain that test data. So you have the option to do one or the other. You can fully just pull that set of steps out of all your cases, or you can just delete the sharing property and retain that data in your test cases, and then make edits where you need to. You cannot,
Awesome.
however, pick which cases you want to delete them from.
All right, are there any current plans to expand the shared test steps functionality to apply to other fields, such as shared preconditions or similar?
We don't have an immediate item that we're looking at providing additional sharing options for. However, we do want to, gather some feedback from customers and see, what else would be helpful as far as a shared test entity, to help further, facilitate reusable aspects of shared test cases. So if you have any feedback, we would appreciate it. So.
Okay. Sorry, going through some of these questions. If we don't get to everybody today, I'm sorry we missed your question. Feel free to reach out to our support team at contact@gurock.com for more direct assistance if there is anything you're curious about. Shared steps can include screenshots and references. Yes. When you are updating the either directly updating a shared step or you're updating shared steps inside of a test case that you plan to share, then you can add references to each individual step as needed. You can also use the little landscape photo there, or landscape icon there to add your to embed any images you'd like to include inside of your individual steps.
I think we have time for just a couple more questions here, Jacob.
Okay. Is the retention policy applicable? Oh, that question disappeared for me as I was reading it. Is the retention policy applicable for the test cases which are permanently deleted?
No, permanently deleting test cases will immediately remove them. They are not retained for any period of time. So we would, like I said, recommend just severely limiting who has permission to permanently delete test cases.
Okay, and are there plans to add folder organization to the shared steps repository?
Yes, that's something we're looking at implementing down the road. It's just this is a building block for more reusable items and test cases. So if as the shared step repositories grow for customers, we'll be looking at potentially implementing some additional organizational structure for those. At the moment, they're all stored in a single searchable section.
Okay, do you see this one question? One of my team members reported that editing step box, the longer text no longer increases the size of the box. It causes text to get a scroll bar, or the buttons are hiding the bottom line of text. If you could please send that to our support team, just send us a report with preferably with a screenshot of what you're seeing. And that way we can take a look there and get a better idea of what's happening and potentially update that internally.
On that item, that only applies to the 3-pane view mode. So if you are editing a single test case in the full view mode, you can see the draggable bars to expand that text. Unfortunately, in the 3-pane view mode, however, those buttons, the fields are not expandable or resizable. So longer text can be kind of hidden or displayed behind the buttons at present. So that is something we are looking at a fix for as well.
Okay, let's see, what is the maximum time period for mark is deleted?
30 days.
Cases? Cool. Is it possible to create a copy or duplicate shared steps? If you wanted to have present, like I guess if you want to create a second set of a shared step and then make changes to that.
At the moment, no. They're single sets that don't have copy functions at present.
Okay. Cool. Let's see, will deleting a screenshot in shared steps be considered as permanent delete? Yes, so the mark as deleted really only applies to full test cases. Any other entity, including attachments or shared steps in this case, or any other major entity in the system is going to be a full deletion once it's removed from the system. But it's test cases that, if they are marked as deleted, would be able to be restored.
All right, I think one more question and then we'll wrap this up here, Jake.
All right, let me see if I can. I know I saw one a moment ago. Sorry, I'm kind of lost my place in the questions box here. One thing I will note is there were a number of people. I saw a couple different reports saying that they weren't seeing the option for shared steps. So in order to see the shared steps, you will need to, like if you're creating or editing a test case, you'll need to change the template to the test case steps template. When you are using the test case steps template is when you'll see the individual steps option. Go and hit the add step button to get started, and that's where you can add steps to your test case and then share them and create multiple shared steps that way. So if you're not seeing the option for shared steps, that is likely why you will need to set up your test cases to use that specific template.
Yes, so the inside test cases, as Jacob mentioned, the visibility of shared steps requires the separated steps field. In your project, if you are not even seeing the shared steps button in your list of test cases, then this would indicate the shared separated steps field is not enabled for your project. So the field itself must be enabled for your project before you can begin using steps. I would assume that almost everybody does use this field. However, if you are interested in using it and the option is not there, then you would have to enable that field or add it to your instance if you do not have the separated steps field.
Okay, and last question, do we have any idea when the server version of 7.0 will be released?
I would anticipate that being available in the coming days. I don't have a firm date on that yet, but we are working on that to get that out as quickly as possible for both server and Docker.
Awesome. Just to give a little bit of context there, we do release to cloud first and gather any feedback or data, make sure that we don't have any outstanding bugs or anything that's potentially could cause issues with people hosting the same software on their own systems. And that way we know that when we do release the server version that it is stable for everyone. Since we take our own backups, we know that anything that we do in cloud is going to be safe and secure. We do not have that that guarantee with people's hosted data. So we do try to make sure that anything we release to the server customers is going to be as stable as possible.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate the questions, Jacob. And once again, please reach out to us at contact@gurock.com if you have any questions or if there's anything else we can do to help. Thank you very much for attending, and everyone have a great afternoon or morning.